I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I'm the youngest of three siblings. Growing up, it was pretty obvious I was the odd one out. My parents always had a clear favorite, or favorites, I should say. My brother 35M and sister 32F were everything parents could brag about: steady jobs, big houses, perfect marriages, and those adorable Christmas card families. My brother works in finance, my sister is some kind of lawyer, and they both live in beautiful suburban neighborhoods with spouses who match their resumes. They're exactly the type of children my parents can boast about to friends and relatives at every family event. Then there's me. I quit my corporate job 2 years ago and started a small business I'm really proud of. I make enough to live comfortably and I'm happy with my life. My boyfriend of 5 years and I live together in a rented house, and while we aren't rolling in money, we're doing just fine. My parents, however, see it differently. Stable and traditional are two words they love to throw around, and I guess I don't fit that mold. I've learned to ignore the subtle digs about my hobby job or comments about how my life would be easier if I'd stuck with a 9 to 5. We've always been polite on the surface, but the tension has been there for years. Still, I didn't think it was this bad. A few weeks ago, I was scrolling through Instagram when I noticed my cousin's story. She was at what looked like a family gathering, a big one. It was the kind of event my family usually holds a couple times a year, with all the extended relatives crammed into one house. My brother and sister were there, all smiles with their spouses. My aunt, uncle, cousins, everyone was tagged except for me. At first I thought maybe I missed the group chat. Maybe the invite was buried in all my notifications. I texted my siblings. My brother usually answers immediately, and my sister, while slower, doesn't ignore me completely. Hours passed and nothing. I started to get that weird feeling in my chest, the kind you get when you know something is wrong but you don't want to admit it yet. The next day, I called my mom. I kept my voice casual, asking her how things were and whether there'd been a get-together. The phone line went silent for a beat too long. Then she said, "Oh, the reunion. I didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy with your little business and everything." It took me a second to respond. I asked her what she meant. Why would she assume I wouldn't want to come? My family is my family, after all. Her voice turned lighter, like she was trying to wave the conversation away. "We just didn't want to bother you, sweetheart. Besides, you've missed a few events before." That was true, but mostly because of work, and not without letting them know. The more I pressed, the more it became clear my absence wasn't an oversight. I hadn't been forgotten. They had decided not to invite me. I don't know why, but something about hearing it directly made my stomach drop. After hanging up, I sat there replaying the conversation. This wasn't the first time I'd been excluded. There were plenty of holidays where plans just seemed to revolve around my brothers' or sisters' families. I used to tell myself it wasn't intentional. I didn't have kids or a traditional life, so maybe they didn't think about how I fit into their plans. But now, sitting in my quiet kitchen while my boyfriend worked in the next room, I couldn't ignore it anymore. This was deliberate. When I told my boyfriend, he was furious on my behalf. He said something like, "You need to go anyway. They don't get to decide you don't belong there." He was right. Why should I let them pretend I don't exist? My family had always made me feel like an afterthought, and I was sick of it. I deserved to be part of my family, whether they liked it or not. That's when the plan started forming. There was one card I hadn't played yet, something I'd been sitting on for weeks. My boyfriend and I had gotten engaged 2 weeks earlier. We hadn't told anyone because I wanted to do it in person, with the people who should care about my life. But now I had my own reasons. If they were going to exclude me from my family, I would remind them that I'm here. They wouldn't just brush me off this time. So I decided I'd show up unannounced. My boyfriend, bless him, offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I needed to do on my own. He promised to drive up and get me if things went badly, and we came up with a backup plan. I'd show up, and if they didn't want me there, I'd leave. But not before sharing my news. In the days leading up to it, I baked a big batch of treats to take with me, something I knew would look natural, like I'd always planned to come. My boyfriend kept telling me I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, but for me, this wasn't about proving myself. It was about showing up for myself. I was tired of shrinking away just because they didn't think I fit. I told myself I'd go, smile, share my news, and leave if I had to. I couldn't control how they felt about me, but I could control how I handled it. For once, I wasn't going to let them treat me like an outsider, and if things went badly, at least I'd have closure. Update 1. The drive to my parents' house took just over 3 hours. I spent most of it rehearsing how to act normal, like I just happened to drop by because, oh, of course I knew about the family reunion. The box of homemade cookies on the passenger seat smelled sweet and comforting, a little too ironic considering the reason I was there. My boyfriend had double-checked the location and promised to be ready to pick me up if I needed an escape plan. I told him I'd keep him updated. When I finally pulled up to the house, there were cars parked along the driveway, and even on the lawn. It was packed. I took a deep breath, grabbed the box of treats, and walked toward the front door. The sounds of laughter, music, and clinking dishes carried out from inside. The door was slightly ajar, so I let myself in. The moment I stepped inside, the noise stopped. I didn't need to look up to know they'd all seen me. Conversations dropped mid-sentence, and I felt dozens of eyes swing toward me. My mom was the first to recover. She came over quickly, her voice too high and cheerful. "Oh, you made it. What a surprise." She didn't hug me, just gave a little pat on my arm before stepping back. The fake warmth in her tone didn't reach her eyes. The room settled into an awkward shuffle of movement. People turned back to their conversations, but it wasn't the same. I caught my brother and sister exchanging a look across the room before my brother disappeared into the kitchen. My sister, standing with her husband, glanced at me once before diving back into a loud conversation with some aunts. I spotted my cousin across the room, the same one whose Instagram story had clued me in. She looked surprised to see me but gave me a small smile and a nod. I placed my box of treats on the dining table, next to a spread of food that looked like it had been catered. No one even glanced at what I'd brought. As I made my way through the room, I overheard an aunt whispering to someone near the hallway. Did they not invite her on purpose? That one stung. I paused, pretending to check my phone before slipping past them into the living room. A few minutes later, my cousin pulled me aside. She glanced over her shoulder, lowering her voice. They didn't think you'd come. Your parents. Well, they didn't think you'd fit in here anymore. She looked like she regretted saying it, but there it was. Fit in. Like I was a broken puzzle piece in a family photo. I don't remember what I mumbled in response, but I walked off, finding my dad by the drink station. I decided to test the waters. I asked him about the reunion, why no one had mentioned it to me. He barely looked up from the glass he was filling and said, "We thought you'd be happier doing your own thing." It wasn't cruel, but the words hung heavy in the air. I didn't push him further. It was obvious I wouldn't get answers. By now, the box of cookies I'd brought sat untouched on the table, and I didn't feel like forcing small talk with relatives who were pretending not to notice me. It wasn't all bad, though. A couple of my younger cousins came up to say hi. They asked about my business and said they'd seen some of my work online, which made me feel a little better. At least someone was interested in my life. The room buzzed with conversation again, and I found a spot near the corner, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. I didn't want to make a scene, I just needed time to figure out my next move. That's when my sister's voice cut through the chatter. She clapped her hands, her face glowing with excitement. "Everyone, I have some news to share." The room quieted, and all eyes turned to her as she announced she was pregnant with her second child. Cheers erupted, people clapped, and a couple of uncles joked about starting bets on whether it'd be a boy or a girl. My mom looked like she might explode from happiness. No one even glanced at me. I stood there, listening to the congratulations and laughter. It was as if I had become invisible again, just like always. The same pattern. It didn't matter that I was there. It didn't matter that I'd shown up despite not being invited. They would always celebrate my siblings while treating me like an outsider. Something inside me snapped. I don't know if it was the gossip I'd overheard, my dad's dismissal, or the fact that my cookies were still sitting there, untouched. Maybe it was all of it. I grabbed a glass from the drink table and clinked it loudly with my fork. The room slowly quieted again, and heads turned toward me. My sister, who had been basking in the attention, looked annoyed. I ignored it. "Well," I said, keeping my voice steady since we're sharing big news. "I've got something to say too." Update 2. The room went silent again, just like when I first walked in. Every conversation stopped, forks froze midair, and all eyes were on me. The attention wasn't as warm or excited as when my sister announced her pregnancy, though. It was more like I'd interrupted something sacred. I stood tall, my hand steady even though my heart was pounding. "I just wanted to share some news of my own," I said. I held up my left hand, showing the engagement ring that glinted under the dining room lights. "I got engaged 2 weeks ago." For a moment, no one reacted. Then a few scattered claps broke the silence. My younger cousins, bless them, gave me little cheers from the side of the room. A polite uncle nodded in approval, but the rest of the room stayed frozen, as if they didn't quite know how to process it. My mom's face dropped before she forced a thin smile, the kind she usually reserved for strangers. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Her tone wasn't excitement or curiosity, it sounded more like an accusation. Her eyes darted to the ring before locking back on me. I didn't hesitate. "I wasn't sure you'd care," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "After all, I wasn't invited here. I figured you didn't want me involved in family things anymore." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. People shifted in their seats or glanced at one another, pretending to check their phones. My brother, who'd been standing by the kitchen doorway, pushed off the frame and stepped forward. His face was red and his voice came out sharp. "This isn't about you. You always have to make everything about yourself." That got a reaction. A couple of people murmured "not now" under their breath, but I could feel everyone watching. My brother crossed his arms, his stare challenging me to say something else. So I did. "Really? Because I don't remember getting an invite to this little party, but you all seem just fine without me," I shot back. "My engagement is just as important as anyone else's news." At that, the room fell quiet again. My sister, still glowing from her own announcement, wouldn't look at me. My mom's polite mask was starting to crack, her expression shifting into something more familiar, irritation. I watched her inhale, probably to say something, but before she could, a voice cut through the tension. "She has every right to be upset," one of my cousins said. She was sitting near the edge of the couch, arms folded. "If you didn't invite her, what did you expect? That she'd just stay quiet forever?" A few heads turned toward my cousin. Another voice chimed in from the dining table. "Yeah, it's not like she's wrong." For a brief second, I felt something shift. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The cracks were showing. My mom, probably realizing she was losing control of the situation, did what she always does when she's cornered. She changed the subject. "Well," she said, forcing cheer back into her voice, "let's not forget how exciting it is that your sister is having another baby. That's wonderful news for the family." It was so obvious. The deflection. She couldn't let me have this moment, not even for a second. The attention instantly turned back to my sister, who smiled tightly and thanked everyone again for their congratulations. My brother shot me a smug look, as if to say, "See? I'd had enough." I pulled my phone from my pocket, and without saying a word, sent a quick text to my boyfriend. "Come get me." I wasn't staying a minute longer than I had to. I grabbed my purse and headed toward the front door. A couple of my younger cousins rushed after me, asking where I was going and saying how sorry they were. One of them gave me a hug, whispering, "You don't deserve this." I squeezed her back and told her I'd be fine. As I was slipping on my coat, I heard my dad's voice mutter from the other side of the room. "Drama queen." It wasn't loud, but it was loud enough. I paused for a second, but I didn't turn around. Instead, I opened the door and stepped outside. The cool air hit me like a shock, clearing the heaviness in my chest. I didn't make it halfway down the driveway before one of my cousins ran out after me. She jogged to catch up, her shoes crunching on the gravel. "Wait," she called out. I stopped, turning to face her. She looked embarrassed, almost like she wasn't sure what to say. "I'm sorry," she blurted. "For everything." That was brave. You stood up for yourself in there? You didn't deserve to be treated like that. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Thanks, I managed to say. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably someone from inside asking what I was doing. She gave me one last apologetic look and hurried back toward the house. My boyfriend's car pulled up a few minutes later. I got in, tossed my purse on the seat, and buckled my seatbelt. The second I felt the car move, I broke down. The tears came out hard and fast, like I'd been holding them back for hours. My boyfriend didn't say anything. He just reached over and squeezed my hand. I let it all out while the trees blurred past outside the window. By the time we pulled onto the main road, the sobbing had turned into quiet sniffles. I still felt raw and humiliated, but underneath all that, there was something else too. Relief. For the first time, I hadn't just let it happen. I'd spoken up. I'd made them see me, even if they didn't want to. Update 3. The car ride back home was quiet at first, except for the hum of the road. I stared out the window while my fiancé drove, my head replaying every second of what had just happened at the reunion. After a while, I started talking about the way my mom had ignored me, my dad's drama queen comment, my brother's jab, and how my sister's pregnancy announcement had been the final straw. Everything poured out. My fiancé listened, nodding every now and then, his hand resting on the gear shift. When I finished, he glanced over and said, "You did the right thing. They don't get to decide you don't matter. We'll move forward without needing their approval." I didn't say anything, but it helped to hear. We were almost home when my phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was a message from the cousin who'd followed me out of the reunion. "You were right. Your parents have been talking about you behind your back for a while." I sat up straighter. The message didn't stop there. "I'm sorry, but you need to know this. Your mom told everyone you're a disappointment because you don't have a stable career. She also said your engagement doesn't compare to your sister's news." I didn't think it was fair. I read the words twice, trying to process them. I was still staring at the screen when another message came through, this time, screenshots. It was from a group chat labeled Family Catch-Ups that I'd clearly been left out of. In one of the screenshots, my mom's name was there, clear as day. I don't know why she'd want to come anyway. She's always doing her own thing and making everything about her. Quitting a real job to play business owner. So selfish. At least sister is living a life we can be proud of. My chest tightened. The next screenshot was worse. Honestly, I didn't tell her about the reunion because I didn't want her coming and ruining the day with some dramatic story about her engagement. It's not like she's getting married first, so who cares? I felt my fiancé's glance over at me when the screen lit up again. "What is it?" he asked. "Proof," I said quietly. By the time we got home, I was still staring at the screenshots. I don't know if it was anger, hurt, or disbelief that pushed me, but I opened my family group chat, the one I'd been removed from years ago and only occasionally got added back into for important updates, and added myself back in. The moment I saw my name pop up in the chat, I sent the screenshots. Nothing else. Just those receipts for everyone to see. A few seconds later, I typed, "Is this how you really feel about me? I guess I should have stayed forgotten." Then I put my phone down and waited. It didn't take long for the responses to flood in. My brother came in first. "This was private. You're being dramatic and blowing things out of proportion, as usual." Then my sister. "What did you think sharing this would do? You're just making everything worse for no reason. Let it go." I could see them typing, one after the other, their messages popping up like rapid fire. I let them rant for a minute before my mom's name finally appeared. Her message was longer than the others. Those comments were taken out of context. "You're reading too much into things, and I don't appreciate you causing all this unnecessary drama. You've always been too sensitive." I picked up the phone again and typed a reply. "Taken out of context? I'm hurt because no parent should talk about their child this way. I didn't even get invited to my own family's reunion, and this is what you think of me." For the first time, my dad's name appeared in the chat, but he didn't type anything, just a scene marker under my message. I didn't stick around to read the rest. I put my phone on silent and tossed it onto the couch. My fiancé sat next to me, pulling me close, but before long, my phone buzzed again. It was a private message from one of my aunts. "I didn't know any of this was happening. I'm so sorry for the way you've been treated. You deserve better." A few minutes later, another message came in. "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." It wasn't a lot, but it made me feel like I wasn't losing my mind. For so long, I'd thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I really was too sensitive, like my mom always said. But now I had proof, and at least a couple of people on my side. I was starting to think the worst of it was over when my phone rang. My sister's name popped up on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but I did. She didn't waste any time. "You're ruining the family dynamic," she said. "Why couldn't you just let it go? Mom didn't invite you because she didn't want any tension. You've only made things worse." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just replied, "Not being invited to your own family's reunion isn't something you let go." She hung up after that. That night, I sat with my fiancé and decided I'd had enough. I wasn't going to keep begging for their approval. I wasn't going to chase after a family that clearly didn't want me around. For my own peace of mind, I had to take a step back. I deleted the group chat. I blocked my sister's number. And for the first time in years, I told myself it was okay to stop trying. I wouldn't beg for love that wasn't freely given. Update 4. A week after the family group chat fallout, my phone rang unexpectedly. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was my dad. For context, my dad rarely called me, ever. He mostly left family matters to my mom, so seeing his name pop up surprised me. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. At first, he didn't say much, just the usual awkward pleasantries. Then, after a long pause, he said he wanted to clear the air about the reunion. His voice was stiff, almost rehearsed. He called it a miscommunication and said it wasn't meant to hurt me. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard from him in years. I didn't let him off the hook. I asked why I wasn't invited in the first place. He fumbled for words before landing on, "It wasn't intentional." I told him that didn't make sense. How does forgetting to invite your own child happen accidentally? He didn't answer, so I pressed again, reminding him that my mom's own words in the group chat proved otherwise. The silence dragged on for a second too long. Then he cracked. She thought it'd be better that way, he admitted quietly. Your mom didn't want any tension. That's when I heard it, a faint rustling in the background, followed by my mom's voice. She must have been listening in on speakerphone because suddenly she jumped into the conversation. I'm here too, she said sharply, as if I'd somehow summoned her. And then the waterworks started. Her voice wavered as she accused me of attacking her and humiliating the family by sharing the screenshots. According to her, I was the one causing problems, not her. She said I'd made everything public just to embarrass her and stir up drama. I didn't argue or yell. I kept my voice steady and told her I wasn't attacking anyone. I just wanted the truth. My fiancé, who'd been sitting nearby, heard what was happening and came over. He put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Don't let them twist this." It was enough to ground me. When my mom realized I wasn't backing down, her tone changed. She sniffed loudly and then said something that nearly made me laugh out loud. You only announced your engagement at the reunion to steal your sister's spotlight. I didn't hesitate. I told her, calmly, that I had every right to share happy news about my life, just like my sister had. I wasn't competing with anyone. I reminded her that if I'd been invited in the first place, none of this would have happened. The silence that followed told me I'd hit a nerve. Instead of acknowledging anything, she shifted into her favorite tactic, playing the victim. If you can't forgive us and move on, she said dramatically, maybe it's better if you don't come to family events at all. There it was, the ultimatum. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I just let out a small breath and said, if that's how you feel, then fine. And then I hung up. For a minute, I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. My fiancé sat down next to me, waiting quietly. I told him what happened, from my dad's half apology to my mom's accusation, and her ultimatum. He nodded and said, they're showing you exactly who they are. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The phone call replayed over and over in my mind, but more than that, I started thinking about everything that had led up to this moment. I thought about the holidays I'd spent alone because my siblings' families took priority. The way my parents always compared my unstable career to my sister's law firm job and my brother's corner office. The subtle looks, the dismissive comments, it had all been leading here. I realized something as I lay there. I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve to fight for scraps of affection or pretend like everything was fine when it wasn't. My family had shown me time and time again that I would always come second to my siblings. And for the first time, I decided I wouldn't keep chasing after people who made me feel like I wasn't enough. The next morning, my fiancé brought me a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. He looked serious. I've been thinking, he said, why don't we have our own engagement party? Something small, just people who actually support us. At first, the idea sounded strange. My family had been my default for so long that I hadn't even thought about celebrating without them. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Why keep giving my energy to people who didn't care? I wanted to celebrate this milestone with people who loved us for who we were, not who they wanted us to be. By the end of the day, we had a list of friends, my fiancé's family, and a few cousins who'd reached out to me privately after the reunion. They'd all told me the same thing. I deserved better. So I decided to let go of what I couldn't control and focus on the people who showed up for me, without conditions. I didn't tell my parents or siblings about the party. At this point, I knew it would only cause more drama, and I was done trying to fix something that had been broken for years. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to beg for their love or approval. I was done chasing after a family that didn't see me. I was finally choosing myself. Update 5. The engagement party was everything I didn't realize I needed. We kept it small and intimate, just close friends, my fiancé's family, and a handful of my cousins who had been supportive through all the chaos. We set up string lights in our backyard, brought out a mix of homemade food and takeout, and decorated the tables with flowers my fiancé had picked up from a local market. Simple but perfect. People started showing up in the early evening. The atmosphere was light, full of laughter, and the kind of genuine excitement I hadn't felt at any family event in years. The cousin who'd sent me the screenshots hugged me the moment she arrived. You deserve better, she said softly. We're proud of you. She didn't bring up the reunion, and I was grateful for that. The biggest surprise came about an hour later. My fiancé nudged me as another car pulled up to the curb. I turned to see one of my aunts getting out. This wasn't just any aunt, she was the only one who had privately texted me after the group chat fallout, apologizing and saying she hadn't known what had been happening. I wasn't expecting her, but there she was, carrying a small wrapped gift and wearing a warm smile. I hope it's okay that I came, she said, stepping into the yard. I wanted to see you both and say congratulations in person. She hugged me, and for a moment, I couldn't say anything. I just nodded and led her inside. Having her there meant more than I could put into words. It wasn't about the numbers, it was about the people who showed up for me, unconditionally. As the evening went on, my fiancé gave a toast. He raised his glass, and the crowd fell quiet. To my future wife, he said, smiling at me, I've watched her face so many challenges and still come out stronger on the other side. I couldn't be prouder of the person she is and the life we're building together. The crowd cheered, and someone called out to the happy couple. I stood there, holding my glass, surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to celebrate with us. For the first time, I felt truly seen. There were no comparisons, no backhanded comments, no pressure to prove anything, just love. We wrapped up late, lingering around the fire pit with a small group of friends. One of my cousins laughed and said, I haven't seen you this happy in years. She wasn't wrong. 2 weeks later, I got an email that caught me off guard. It was from my dad. I sat there staring at his name in my inbox before finally opening it. He started with an apology. This time it felt different. He admitted he'd failed to stand up for me at the reunion and in many moments before that. He said he hadn't realized how deeply I'd been hurt over the years and that he regretted not doing more to make me feel included. He wrote, I know I've been silent when you needed me to speak up. I hope we can start rebuilding this relationship, even if it takes time. I read it twice before scrolling down. At the bottom, he'd added something that made me pause. Your mom still doesn't see things the same way. She believes she's the real victim in all of this, and I don't know if she'll ever admit her mistakes. I'm sorry for that too. It stung, but it wasn't surprising. My mom had always been unwilling to accept blame for anything. I thought about what to say for a while before finally typing out a short response. I thanked my dad for reaching out and told him that I appreciated his words, but that actions matter more to me. If he truly wanted to rebuild things, it would take effort on both sides. I didn't expect a reply right away, and honestly, I didn't need one. I wasn't holding my breath for him to become the perfect parent overnight. For now, his small step was enough, but I wouldn't settle for half measures. I wasn't going to force myself back into a dynamic where I didn't feel valued. Of course, my sister couldn't resist stirring the pot. A few days later, I noticed a passive-aggressive Facebook post from her. It was vague but obvious enough. Funny how some people love airing dirty laundry for attention. Family is family, good or bad. I didn't respond. I didn't even let it sit in my mind long enough to get angry. I just blocked her and moved on. The weight of her opinion, her jabs, her judgment, it didn't hold any power over me anymore. In the weeks that followed, life felt quieter but fuller. I focused on my business, on planning our wedding, and on spending time with people who actually cared about me. I let go of the need to chase my family's approval, and in doing so, I finally found peace. Looking back, I realized I'd spent so much of my life trying to fit into a mold I was never meant to fit. My family had always made me feel like I was less than, because I was different, but that didn't make me wrong. Their inability to see my worth wasn't a reflection of me, it was a reflection of them. I know some people might say, family is everything, and maybe for them, that's true. But family should be about love, respect, and support, not judgment and exclusion. I'm finally building a life with people who show up for me without conditions, and I've never felt happier. So here I am, moving forward without guilt or regret. I don't know what the future holds with my parents or siblings, but I know this, I'm done settling for less than I deserve. And honestly, it feels pretty damn good.